Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the operating budget hearings, and for the record, we have, we have Freeman, Keith, Milkovich from the committee, and in addition to that, we have Mr. Neal, Mr. Fusco, Mr. Kilby. Just a reminder, we really want to try to stay on point. Any questions, please have them be related to the budget at hand, and that would be deeply appreciated. So, Mr. Fricker, I will turn it over to you. Please begin. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today we have the Law Department, the Human Resources Department, the Planning Department, and the Finance Department.
Okay, thank you. Who will be speaking for law?
It will be the Law Department first.
Okay. Welcome, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you know, one other thing I will add is the IT department formerly was part of finance. It was actually moved under the mayor's office at the end of last year, but when we set up the budget schedule, they were included under finance. So the information technology department will be a bit of a separate presentation today.
Okay, and one other thing I did want to request, if and when we refer to a point of the budget, if you could please, just for the sake of the recording, for the sake of folks on both sides, if you could refer to the page number that you might be having questions on. That'll help. Thank you. Ms. Belfonte, thank you.
Can you all hear me? So as you well know, and certainly I will be brief, but the City of Akron Law Department activities are really comprised into both the civil and criminal division. So we are, broadly speaking, engaging in a variety of legal services for the city. We process claims, we're engaged in collections, we prepare contracts, we engage and defend lawsuits, we respond to legal inquiries, public records requests, we prepare legislation, we respond to subpoenas in addition to other matters. And then on, of course, the criminal side, we are prosecuting cases, misdemeanor cases in the city of Akron and other jurisdictions. So I don't know if you have any particular questions about the proposed budget.
Yeah, so the budget for the Law Department starts on page 10-1 and extends to 10-5. I do not, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, today there's actually fewer pages than there's been the other 2 days, so it wouldn't take that long to print these out.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Kilby just killed 3 trees. All right, we're open to questions or comments, and primarily we're focusing on 10-1 through 5, correct?
Correct, yes.
If no one from the committee has a question, I have one.
No, feel free, please.
All right. It's probably in here, but I didn't have a chance to look it over. How many employees do we have in the civil and in the criminal division? Can you give us a breakdown?
Yes. So we have three employees in the administrative division. We have 14 and a half in the civil division and 11 and a half in the criminal division. Now, there's actually one more that is charged to the sewer fund that's not reflected here.
Okay.
So that's a total of 30 employees.
Yeah. Anyways, it's probably in here, but like I said, I haven't had a chance to look it over. One thing that has always wondered, you know, maybe Ms. Belfonte can answer this, like, when we hire outside counsel, and we seem to do that a lot, I don't know if we're doing as much as we used to, where does that show up in the budget? Outside counsel, when we have to hire outside counsel, and it happens quite often in the civil division, we're, you know, doing something, where does that show up in the budget? On what page, and where's
Well, it actually will occur throughout the various budgets. So there are certain legal matters that some of the outside counsel will appear here under the law department. Some will appear under, if there's a case that's specific to a certain department, the legal costs will you know, be reflected in those budgets themselves. Like, for instance, the police department has some, our zoning department, you'll see, has some, you know, just kind of throughout the city, if there's a specific matter that relates to a particular department, and there's a specific outside legal contract to handle that matter, it will be charged to that department.
Okay, now, how do we handle that? Is it like, do we budget so much money anticipating how much it's going to cost, or do we just kind of pay it as it comes along? 'Cause
We do our best to anticipate what the cost will be. You know, sometimes that's difficult, but we do make an attempt, you know, to estimate what the contractual cost will be.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago, and I can't remember how many, I'm sure Mr. Freeman remembers this, might have been 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, when we were trying to foreclose on the, what was it, the steam plant. Whoever, we hired somebody, it was the last mayor, so, but I'm just bringing this up for maybe discussion. The mayor, or somebody hired somebody to handle a bankruptcy. Max Rothel, I think, was still the law director. That's how long ago it was, probably 10 years ago at least. And it ran into, like, this was just a bankruptcy, and, you know, we were amazed on how much we spent on that, a lot of money for a bankruptcy, and I guess things can drag out, but I guess what I'd like to know is there any big civil cases now that are pending that we have outside counsel on? Are there any big cases? I mean, you know, how many cases would you say there are total that we have outside counsel on, that we're paying outside counsel?
I don't know specifically how many we have. Am I on? Oh, there, sorry. I don't know specifically how many we have for outside counsel, but I can think of one case where that is a substantial case that would have probably is being charged to police because it involves it's a police case with.
So which case is that?
That would be the, I can get the name of the case to you. I can't think of it right now.
But what's it about? I mean, do you have any idea?
I would be even more interested, where will that show up in the budget?
Yeah.
Where would that show up in the budget, something like that? So is that going to fall?
That would fall under the police budget.
Right, so you would see that in the police general fund budget under the current expenditures category.
Okay.
All right, so let me ask you this. I understand what you're saying, like it depends on the department, but who makes the decision on who to hire is outside counsel? Is that the law director's call? Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yes.
that makes sense. And how do you determine, look for somebody that you think is an expert in this particular field, somebody you have a good feeling for?
Correct.
And what is the going rate for stuff like that? I mean, $250 an hour, or what? What is that? What's
Well,
going rate usually? I mean, you can give me a ballpark.
Generally speaking, we try to be around $200 an hour, so we try to, you know.
You said
negotiate with
$250 an hour?
200. We
Okay.
try to stay in
Okay.
that ballpark if we can. And in some instances where there's something really technical, highly specialized,
Yeah.
sometimes you know, it is what it is. Sometimes, you know, there are just areas such as like environmental compliance or some highly, you know, telecommunications, those areas, again, the law department, those are highly specialized areas.
Yeah, I
So
understand
we
that,
do
and we can't have a
to-
specialist in everything, but, so, would you say what's the most important determining factor in making the decision to hire outside counsel? Is it we don't have the manpower, or that we don't have the specialty or expertise in that particular area? Is it, what is it, combination of both, or?
I think it is. I think it is.
Okay.
Because it depends if there is something highly specialized that we simply
I
cannot
understand.
render, you know, the
Yeah.
service for. That would be obviously the big factor going into that decision.
Right. Well, you know, I noticed over the years, you know, it's not exactly, it's like comparing apples, it's not really apples to apples, but in engineering, we used to hire, it seems like a lot more engineering firms to do things, okay, for us, and pay them a lot of money. And I just wonder, like, and you haven't been law director that long, but
Right.
have we made an attempt to minimize the amount of outside counsel because of the budget restraints we have?
Well, certainly, absolutely. I think that we look at that all the time.
Okay.
And, you know, we're trying to be as efficient as we can.
Right.
But the one thing the city can't control is volume, and
I
so
understand.
I could walk in tomorrow and there could be a
Something
number.
comes up
Yeah,
out of the
something
blue.
just happens,
I
and
understand.
it's
So, Mr.
the
Kilby,
unfortunate reality.
as relates to the budget, and I don't know if
Yeah.
you're saying we need more,
Yeah.
just as it relates to the budget, or that's probably the question.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, and this has been the case for probably a number of years, it's fair to say that, you know, we have so much on our plates, and we're all trying to do more with less. That is something I'm sure that you're seeing in the course of these proceedings, and
Right.
that's no different for the law
I
department,
understand
that
that.
we are,
I guess the real bottom line
we
question
are a
would be...
busy place.
I mean, it comes to a point like, and someone has to make a decision. Is it to our advantage to keep hiring outside counsel or hire more people to work in the law department?
Yeah, I
mean,
think that's a great question, and I think that would be something that we'd have to look at in terms of knowing the answer is really knowing what that cost looks like. So it's certainly something to look at. What I do know is that just historically, I guess in the crisis, the economic crisis, there were a lot of folks who left the law department, and I don't, you know, so that number went down by perhaps a third. So it's
Okay.
remained low, but in terms of the economics, that analysis of, you know, what is it better to hire an individual or not? I think
Okay.
you know, you'd have to look at all the costs associated with hiring a person versus,
Yes.
you know.
Well, I guess if we could get, Mr. Fricker said it's in different departments. If it's possible, could we get some information on the different outside counsel that we're paying now, where it appears in the budgets, different departments, and how much we're total, and break it down by department? Is that possible, Mr. Fricker?
Yeah, certainly can we, it would be, I mean, if we pulled the 2017 expenditures, for instance, would that be
Yeah, that would be
sufficient?
fine.
Okay.
Then we pretty much know. And thank you very much.
Okay, I just want to make note, I want to know specifically, the request is what again, Bruce?
I would like to see some kind of a list of, from 2017, of the cases that we hired outside counsel and how much that cost us.
Okay.
And what departments they were in, and maybe some little idea what they were about.
Okay.
Okay, if they're like expertise, or so we can get an idea whether, you know, like, I don't know.
Okay, I think I understand.
But, you know, let me ask you this, Ms. Belfont, I got one more thought that came to my head. Like a bankruptcy, I know it can get complicated, but isn't your average lawyer in the law department, civil division, probably trained to handle something like that?
Well, it depends on the nature. If with respect to my recollection of years ago, the steam issue, that was I believe, a Chapter 11. There were a number of proceedings that were taking place, and so from the standpoint of a Chapter 11 case, you're talking, and if it's a substantial entity, you could be going into the millions of dollars in fees for all of the complexity of what's happening. But in terms of what we see coming here into the law department, we're not filing bankruptcies, and we are often fielding information where there are filers, and then we are actually filing claims within a variety of bankruptcies to retrieve money. This here steam plant, I don't know whether it was an eviction or they filed bankruptcy, we couldn't get them out of there. I don't know, you weren't here then, but it was a long drawn-out process. But do we ever have to pay for expert witnesses? I know that can be really expensive too. We often, they often come up in the cases involving police cases, Section 1983 cases. Like if you can come up with, if there's any expert witnesses we had to hire or consultants on those lines.
You do see transactions as the law director just said in the police budget. You see expert testimony.
That happens very frequently.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
On 10005, we already have kind of gone through some of the Oriana House costs, haven't we? Where would we refer back to on that?
Right, so those costs really exist, and that's, you see that this budget here on 1005, we haven't really funded it. We're pretty much absorbing these minor costs within the prosecutor's office budget.
All right, thank
you. The Oriana House costs are reflected on page 10-3 for the domestic violence investigators.
Okay. All right, any other budget-related questions or comments? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And will Mr. Rice be presenting for us next? Okay, welcome. You'll be covering 1101 through...
Yeah, just 1 and 2. So the Human Resources Department has 2 budgets. It has its general fund operating budget, and then we also have the budget within the self-insurance fund, which is where we pay our medical claims.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me first apologize. I am getting over a very bad chest cold, so if my voice becomes very, very whitish, please excuse me right off the bat. Well, 2017 was kind of a year of stability for the Department of Human Resources, in that we got a full year under our new management structure with myself and the Employment and Selection Manager, Stacy Doty, and the Employee Benefits Manager, Wendy Weaver. So I'm very happy about that. It's kind of led to an air of stability in our department. And some of the things that we accomplished over the last year was in our ongoing relationship with NeoGov, that is our human resources platform. We implemented employee onboarding in a digital format. We are developing in 2018 offboarding in a digital format, and we're also looking at developing, we're in alpha testing of this right now, a NeoGov program called Perform, where we will be doing digital performance evaluations based on a new standard of goals and objectives that we're looking at. And we've also made we've established a good presence on social media, and I think the whole idea about establishing HR's presence on social media is to get our message out to a wider audience. And we presently have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter feed. All those things I know very little about, but they do get our message across. We are also going to implement for the fall of 2018 finally, a digital benefits management system. We ran into a little snag. We had hoped to have that going for our last open enrollment. That did not happen, but we will have it for our 2018 open enrollment, where we can not use paper enrollment. It's very labor intensive. It makes the process much harder than it needs to be. And we've also completed an RFP for a new benefits provider. The provider that won was our present provider, MMO. They gave us some substantial perks to stay with them. And we also have a new pharmacy vendor, that's CVS, and the plan that they presented to us will give us approximately $2 million in savings over the other bids that we received. So we're very happy with what happened in HR over the past year, and we hope to continue to grow and excel in 2018.
That was CVS?
CVS, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm curious, would you mind, because I know some folks, who do you have with you in chambers today from your department?
I think I mentioned both of the people. We have Stacy Doty, who is our employment and selection manager, and we also have Wendy Weaver, who is our benefits manager.
Okay.
Please stand.
Okay.
I'm pretty tall. So that's Wendy Weaver, our employment and our employee benefits manager, and the taller woman is Stacy Doty, our employment and selection manager. I try to surround myself with tall people.
All right. Questions or comments? Mrs. Keith.
Thank you. I sit on another board, and one thing that came up that I never thought about is we get a rebate check for those that go with prescription, that go with the non-name prescription. I want to say
Generic.
Generics, yes.
Thank you. I'm getting generic. With the generic prescription, and they will get a check. Do we get anything like that?
Yes, we have in the past, and yes,
Okay.
we will continue to do that in the future. And with our new vendor, CVS, the rebates that we get are substantially more than the rebates we got from our previous provider.
So that was one of the perks that helped us
Absolutely.
make the decision to go
Absolutely.
with them. Okay, thank you.
Who was it Caremark? Who was previous?
It was MMO previously.
Okay.
They did our pharmacy vending also.
Okay. Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm looking at page 11, too. That's where we're at, correct? Mm-hmm. So this insurance, 74, comprehensive, I guess, health insurance, we get medical mutual, I guess. It's let's see, 2016, let's see, 2017 actual expenditures was only 32,000. Was not, I mean, that's a lot, but it went down a little bit from what it was budgeted. We came in under, which is good. So we're gonna, got 34,500,000 budgeted for 2018. How many employees total do we have?
Well, at
They
present-
get health insurance, not,
They get health insurance. I think the vast majority of our 1,800 employees are on our insurance plan.
there's 1,800. Do we still have any part-time employees, or did we have to eliminate them because of the Obama requirement that?
We still have part-time,
Still have
permanent
some
part-time, and seasonal
Do they get health
employees.
insurance?
No, they do not.
And we cut back
keep
hours
their
because some
hours
of them
down.
exceeded
Yes,
the...
to make it in keeping with the
29
Affordable
hours, is
Care
that what
Act.
it
Yeah,
is?
28.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Okay, so we got about 1,800 employees that are getting the health benefits here?
Thereabouts. I'm sure a small percentage of them choose not to have it.
So, I guess, now there's been I know there's something in the law department pending about our retirees. Can you explain that to us a little bit about what that issue is? I mean, because it's something about the retirees. They say they were promised health insurance from the city, and then something about OPERS said, well, you have to have OPERS for your spouse in order to get what it is. Can somebody explain that to us?
Yes, I can explain that to
Because, I
you.
mean, when the people come in here, I'm not sure if I understand.
I would just ask that we, and I know you're aware too,
Put it in a nutshell.
be very, very, guarded. I know
can do it
that
very briefly.
there's something that's active out there, and
It goes back to 2016, when the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Task Force identified legacy costs as very much a drag on our continual operation as a city. We got together a committee internally. It was a benefits working group in 2016, and we looked at our insurance costs overall and our legacy costs specifically. And one of the things that we found out was that we weren't implementing our supplemental health care program that we historically had in the manner that was intended. We had a lot of spouses and dependents on as primary in our program, okay? Our program was meant to be secondary, okay? So one of the things that we immediately did is we made a policy decision to enforce the secondary benefit nature. And the secondary benefit, the secondary benefit is basically running second behind OPRS insurance or OPNF insurance. It's not a big problem with the police and fire because they've always been secondary and we've always processed them secondary, okay? So we did that and then we went to implement it in 2017, okay? What we found out immediately was that our open enrollment was behind other open enrollments that people could get alternatives for, okay? And the first thing that we saw, we went to our first retiree meeting back in 17, and one of the things that was pointed out to us was that the people who would be affected by this wouldn't have the opportunity to file for other types of health insurance. So I heard that loud and clear, and my staff heard that loud and clear. So we went back to the mayor, and the mayor graciously granted a probation, I would say, a grace period, for lack of a better term, so that people could go out and find health care. So we continued our present practice throughout 2017, and we told the people affected that we were going to give them another year so they could have a whole year to go out and find alternatives, and then we implemented the practice in 2018.
Okay. So I'm looking at the numbers here, and so in 2017, we did allow a number of these spouses to be primary, correct?
Yes,
still?
that is correct.
So can you tell me how many there were and how much that cost us?
Well, I can tell you how many there were, and I can give you statistics for 2016, 2017 of how much it cost us, okay? How many were there? Well, I'll tell you how much it cost us in 2016, 2017. Go to my notes. It cost us about $3.5 million for our retiree health insurance.
For both years or just?
For our benefit period 2016 to 2017.
So you said 3.4 million?
$3.5 million, and if you look, you have to dig deeper in that number.
Yeah.
And the deep dig into that number is that 84% of the money that we paid went to retirees who were younger than 65.
Yeah.
So
How
$3
many
million
were
out
there?
of that
Do you
3.5.
know the numbers, how many there were approximately, or do you know how many there were?
We're getting that number for you. As soon as it's available, I'll tell you.
You don't know, or you're going to get the number?
We're going to give it to you as
Okay,
soon
right
as we
now?
pull it out.
All right, good. So in other words, I guess if we do what they're advocating, you're saying it would cost us,
They being,
yeah, the people that are retirees and their spouses, so it would probably cost about half of this $3.5 million a year, because you said this $3.5 million was for 2 years, 16 and 17?
No, it was a 12-month period that went through 16 and 17.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So it
I'm
would
sorry
cost
if
us
I wasn't
about $3.5 million, or maybe more, a little more or less.
Well, and again, there's some other things that are variables in that number. One thing I really have to explain is kind of a technical explanation,
Yeah.
is that for our active employees, we have something called stop-loss insurance.
Yeah.
And what it is basically is that if any employee has a claim that's over $250,000, our insurance pays from $250 to whatever, to infinity. We can't get that for our retirees. So if there's a catastrophic claim, we have to pay those claims dollar for dollar.
Sure.
Okay?
I got you. So let me get back to something you mentioned, Mr. Royce. You said up until, so we used to treat them as primary, and we weren't following
Some were
letter of
treated
the
as,
law?
some were treated as primary.
Okay, so you're saying the ones basically in the fire, you know, I think you said
Police and fire,
police and fire, they
OP&F.
were not
They were
treated as
secondary.
secondary, but
Right.
most of our employees are like in OPERS, right? And we didn't treat them as secondary, we treated them as primary?
Some, we
spouses?
treated some. It's not a total, I wouldn't use that as a blanket statement.
So we did that for quite a number of years.
Quite a number, more years than I
And
could
no
comment
matter
on.
what the written procedure was, that was the actual procedure that we used?
I can't comment on the past,
Yeah,
but
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know what the basis of this lawsuit's about. Maybe Ellen can tell us. But, you know, I do think that if there's a procedure, a written procedure, and it's ignored, and we follow our, whatever procedure we want, that becomes the procedure, you know? But I don't know, that's just my opinion, but let's not get into this too detailed, because
I
I don't know, we
can't,
might be
because it's the basis of litigation.
making a precedent we don't want to do. But do you have that number of how many employees were involved in this?
Hi, Wendy Weaver, Benefit Manager.
Okay.
And I just have the numbers for just the OPERS, for the OPERS retirees. I didn't do the calculation on spouses for police and fire, but just for our retirees, and this includes both under and over 65 retirees.
Okay.
We had 333 spouses covered in 2017. As of today, we have 128 that would be enrolled. So, yeah.
Okay, so there's, would you say there's 333 spouses, and what's the 128? This was 2017?
2017, we had 333 spouses on the OPERS retiree.
Okay, so how many do we have now?
128.
Okay, yeah, it's so expensive, they can't afford it, but I guess, I know, do we have a little more detailed breakdown of ages besides just over 65 or under 65? I mean, you know, can we tell if they're 43 or 53, or do we know their exact ages?
Exact ages?
Can we
No.
get that? Okay, so, I mean, it's gonna, if we do decide, I'm not saying we're gonna do this, but if we did decide to do this and say, well, no more, okay, this would eventually, in a few years, probably go away, right, this legacy cost? wouldn't it?
More than a few years, sir.
Yeah, okay.
A few decades.
Yeah, because there's children too, I guess.
Absolutely.
I mean, she mentioned spouses, but there's children too, ma'am? Okay. All right. Okay, I guess that's enough on that,
Okay.
unless somebody else.
And we know that there's some litigation out there, and...
Yes. It
this
really
is-
limits our ability to comment on
Okay, very good.
on the policy.
Okay, good. And, yeah, I didn't, almost to a point where a little bit uncomfortable, and
So am I.
maybe no more conversation.
And I'm a lawyer.
So, but, okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Mr. Neal?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the numbers that I heard were correct so that I can do my own kind of thinking and then get back with Ms. Rice. We were told that there's 128 presently that are under and over 65. That 128 accounts for those under and over?
Those are both under and over.
Yes.
Okay. And so, if I heard during the discussion, those that are over can roll over to like a Medicaid or Medicare?
Yes.
Okay. So what's important for
As
us...
actually, I don't mean to overtalk you, Councilman, but actually, quite frankly, OPERS, their health care plan is a Medicare plan, is a Medicare-based plan.
Okay, so, but if, as we look at this, those that are at
For over 65-year-olds.
Oh, those that are over 65 would technically then be able to roll off and not be as impacted because they can get the Medicaid or Medicare? Okay, so if we could get the numbers from you on the number that is under 65, please, out of that 128, that would help.
Okay.
I mean, if you don't have it, if you have it now, okay.
29.
So there's 29, and that's spouses, that's not children, but that's, or is that count spouses and?
Those are just spouses.
Just spouses, sir.
2,900. So that's the big number that we're looking at, the 29 out of that 128, correct?
But you have to really take into account some of the issues that I talked about previously.
Yes, I understand. I understand. And like I said, I
Okay.
want
And I don't want to.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Thank you. Thank you very much.
to, excuse me, I'm not asking you to go into those numbers. I
Well,
mean,
I'm in an uncomfortable position here, and I think Mr. Rice is as well.
No, I understand.
So I'm going to ask if we would move on away from this. But I will, and I'll agree with Mr. Neal. We have had somebody that's asked for some numbers for several weeks, and we really would like to have an understanding and to see that
I'd really like to make sure you do understand.
as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just say one thing. Only thing I'm asking for are the numbers that we use to make our decision already. I'm just trying to get information. I mean, this is just basic information. I'm not getting into the case. I just had a couple more questions that I want to clarify.
Okay,
on
if
numbers that were
it
stated.
pertains to this current budget and
Yes, sir, it
not the
does.
issue with Opers, I'm okay with
Yeah,
that.
yes, sir, it does. Because
Excuse me.
I believe I heard that the police and fire are on a different type of healthcare, so they're already secondary.
Yes, that is true.
They were never.
That is
primary.
correct.
Okay. So
So this is an OPERS parliament, and can I be very frank with you and not reach the bounds of the law school? I think that the real villain here is what OPERS has done with regard to covering spouses and dependents.
No doubt.
And if there was a protest down in Columbus, I'd be standing right next to Mr. No.
Okay, well, the other information I need I can get with you, but this helps us get a little bit closer to some of the things we were trying to figure out. Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks for the work that you all do over there. You're on the first floor, you're easy to come see. So, thank you so much.
We
Any
try
other
our
questions or comments? All right, thank you. Who will we be hearing from next, sir?
Yes, it will be our planning department.
Please announce yourself, sir.
Good afternoon, Jason Segedy, can you guys hear me?
You're good.
Director of Planning and Urban Development.
Welcome. Proceed.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. If you are interested, I can give you a quick synopsis of some of the accomplishments and our goals for this year, or just get right to your questions, whatever your pleasure
Please,
is.
I'd like to hear.
Okay. And I'll start just by giving you a quick overview of how the department's organized. So we've got 5 divisions of the department: comprehensive planning and capital planning, which are managed by Helen Tomick and Jim Ashley; zoning, which is managed by Mike Antonucci; development services, which is managed by Abraham Westcott; and AMATS, which is managed by Curtis Baker. And that crew is behind me, and very proud of the work that they all do. As far as 2017, one thing that we're really proud of is putting together the 2018 capital budget. Appreciate council's approval of that document and the usage of the funds from issue 4, probably the most notable thing about that budget. Another thing that we worked on and did last year, and we're going to build on this year, is a comprehensive inventory of all of the city's parks and some preliminary thoughts about redesign or redevelopment of some of those parks. Continue to work a lot on the sale of city-owned properties. So we sold 79 properties for redevelopment or side yard expansion last year. Another thing in zoning that we are working on, which is relatively new, is the medical marijuana issue, which many of you obviously have worked on firsthand with us. Here at council, we did change the zoning code to reflect that new issue as well as issued approvals for 3 cultivators in 2017. We reconstituted the Urban Design and Historic Preservation Commission. That's an all-new group of folks on that commission working very well together. And 2 of the things I think we're most proud of is putting together the Planning to Grow Akron report, and then working with council to approve the tax abatement program. We really feel like that's going to be a game changer for residential redevelopment in the city, which is probably a good segue into 2018. So one of the mayor's big goals for the department is to make our planning and development in the city more targeted, thoughtful, strategic, really focusing comprehensively on integrating everything we do, not looking at things in a vacuum, but looking at the assets that we can bring to bear across departments, and really looking through the lens of place. And so one of the things that you just heard in the State of the City last week was the creation of this new Office of Integrated Development. Planning makes up the bulk of the staff of that new office. That office is really headed by James Hardy, and is really a lens for how we organize ourselves across planning, economic development, and engineering. So some of the things that are online this year, one project that we're really looking forward to launching is a web-based system for the marketing and sale of city-owned properties. So having a website where people can go, look at properties, browse them, make offers on them. That's actually a partnership we're working on with the Summit County Land Bank. We hope to get that up and running in the next couple months. What I like about the partnership, it's a partnership with another great organization in Summit County, but I think to the average member of the public, they're not so concerned about who owns the property, whether it's the city or the land bank, and so I think that's exciting. Another thing that is in the works that we discussed recently is the redevelopment of Perkins Middle School. That's a partnership we're working on with Alpha Phi Alpha. I was just out at Ward 4 a couple nights ago to talk with residents about that project, and that's going to, we'll get into the details of how that'll be developed this year. Another thing that we're discussing, and it's in light of some of the new residential development and the renewed interest in doing that in the city with the tax abatement program, is planning as partnering, and this is in the spirit of our new Office of Integrated Development, partnering with engineering, public works, public utilities, to look at our design standards in the city. So there's more interest in what I would call traditional new urbanist development, which is houses that are a little closer together with smaller yards. So what we're doing is comprehensively working with our colleagues in those other departments to look at things like our street width standards, how utilities are spaced. We want to continue to make sure that everything is developed in a reasonable and safe manner, but there might be some opportunities to re-look at our standards and make sure that the city is development friendly, but also continues to be planned and designed well. Just 2 other things real quickly, and then happy to answer any questions. We are looking at some reform of the zoning code in a couple different areas. The 3 that I'll just highlight briefly, we're going to continue to do what we call form-based overlays, which I'll explain in English what that actually means, but that's basically taking specific stretches of street, mostly in our business districts, and having some standards about how buildings are placed. A good example would be somewhere like Kenmore Boulevard, and that's actually one we're working on right now, where if any of those buildings, and we hope they're not, but if any were to be torn down, we would have some standards that the buildings that would replace them would have to be up at the sidewalk, the parking would have to be in the back, they would have to match, because what's happened in a lot of the business districts is you get buildings that stick out like a sore thumb. And so that'll be a targeted approach with another initiative I'll mention in a second. Before I do that, though, two other things real quickly. Parking code reform. So we're looking right now at what our parking code says in rethinking some of our parking minimums. So currently in most of the city, in a retail area, you have a minimum number of parking spaces that you have to build. And so if people want to deviate from that, they can come in for a conditional use, obviously. But it might not be the best approach. A lot of cities are getting rid of their parking minimums and feeling that the developer, if they want to build less parking, that's probably a good thing. You know, it's better for the environment with stormwater runoff, it's less pavement. So we are rethinking that. And then I know this came before council a couple months ago. We're looking at our short-term vacation rental issue, looking at basically having the zoning code better address things like Airbnb or other vendors that are out there that people can host other folks in their home. And so this spring, we should be coming to council with some legislation on that. And the thing that I'll end with is another thing the mayor introduced in the State of the City, and that's the Great Streets Program. We're really excited about that program. That's another good partnership across city departments. And the idea behind the Great Streets is really to look, again, strategically and comprehensively at many facets of development in some of our key business districts. So that would be everything from the street design to the aesthetics, the streetscaping, improving the look and feel of the area, but also working really closely with our economic development team on small business attraction, retention, entrepreneurship. And so really taking each of those great streets areas and looking kind of from soup to nuts at how does the street look and feel, what's the business climate like in trying to improve that. And I'll just end in saying we want to take that approach throughout the city. So although we'll focus on those great streets areas, we also want to use that same type of thinking on, you know, every business district in the city, every residential neighborhood. So I won't bend your ear any further on any of that, but happy to answer any questions if you have them.
You'd mentioned the partnership with Land Bank. Does that bump or decrease budget anywhere, or does everything remain the same?
Yeah, no, it should remain the same. And if you want an example of the type of thing that we're talking about, the vendor that we're looking at has built this in a number of cities, but the city of Louisville, Kentucky has a system that would be very similar to probably what we would implement. So if you go to Google, you can check that out, and basically there'll be dots all over a map of where there are available city or land bank owned properties. You can click on it, you can see a photo of it, it'll tell you what it's zoned, it'll tell you generally, you know, if you wanted to buy it, what the price range would be, and they even have, then you can make an offer or, you know, express interest. Because right now, you know, what we're finding, and Abraham and his staff do a great job on this, but somebody says, I'd like to ago, and so AMATs had been operating with less staff than what they're usually tasked for. AMAT's entire budget is reimbursed to the city, so it's entirely federal and state funds or dues from local governments in Summit County. So their budgetary position is strong and doesn't come out of any of our city funds.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Keith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to know, looking at this budget, what are some of the challenges that, because you didn't get everything you wanted, I know that, okay? So, and it sounds to me like from the State of the City address and from what you've said here, thank you for taking on the tasks that you have taken on these last 2 years, because I believe you have puffed a breath of fresh air in the city of Akron and worked with many of the departments to come to some sort of consensus of what we need here in Akron. You know, and I think even as City Hall, we can work in silos ourselves here. So I love what's going to be happening here. But what are some of the challenges you think? Because I think that this is a very broad stroke that we are starting to see here. Not that I'm not happy with it, but if you can.
It's definitely a team effort. I think, you know, one of the challenges that we're working hard on overcoming and confident that we'll continue to is the department it's half the size it was 10 years ago. So we had about 73 employees in the department 10 years ago. We're at around 40 or 38 or so today. So it is smaller. I think, you know, we're doing more with less. I know that's kind of a cliche. I think we're fine with, you know, we've got a great team. We can continue to do that. I'd say the other challenge is just, and again, I think it's an opportunity too, is looking at things lights. We give some facade grants in that area. We work with the small businesses. You get a lot of little things that can kind of build on one another, as opposed to maybe taking an approach where we, you know, do a little bit here and a little bit there. That there are times to do that too, but I do think that the new office is a way of having us kind of overcome that challenge of getting a critical mass of things in an area.
Please.
With the Bowery project that we have going, how much influence do we have in that as a city?
So we've worked hand in hand with the developer on that, and you're all, I think, familiar with at least with the history of how long those buildings were there, and you know, Mayor Horrigan worked really hard to line up this new development team that we're very confident in. Their capital stack, which is basically all the different layers of financing, is largely in place. You know, we've worked with them on the urban design aspects, reviewing what they've done, and I think a great opportunity with that project is the way that the Tiger Grant and that project are going to kind of work hand in hand. So we're really working, I think, well with that developer, and will continue to.
Thank you.
Thank you. The 1205, Mr. Fricker, I may be way off. Is anything represented in there of debt we've issued that we might reissue at lower interest rates? Is anything?
Yes, certainly. We are always looking at refunding opportunities. Our bond underwriters that we work with actually come to us with those opportunities, so they have some very fancy software that they're constantly monitoring where interest rates are, and they have a complete listing of all of our debt, so they will bring us those opportunities and what we look for is about 5 to 6% savings is kind of our bottom threshold. If you remember, the last time we came in, we presented a number of different pieces of bond legislation, which we did not execute all of those because some of them, there was sufficient savings to make it worthwhile to do. It no longer became